During the late 1980s and early 1990s, a former janitor and Civil War reenactor was leading an unremarkable life on the surface. Underneath this facade was a disturbed man and cold-blooded killer. After abducting numerous women and girls, he would finally be arrested in 1994 for the kidnapping of a 15-year-old girl who was eventually found murdered across state lines. After numerous interrogations, he confessed to several murders he'd committed, only to recant them. After he's sent to a federal prison for the criminally insane and is on his second appeal, a federal prosecutor gets an idea: find someone on the inside of the prison system to get him to confess. This is a story of memory, manipulation, murder, and a man who almost had the goods on possibly the worst serial killer ever in America's Midwest. This is Larry Dwayne Hall, the true story of Blackbird, Part 2. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Poland.
Poland!
Yeah, we haven't done them yet. Miliwidziani.
That's welcome.
You got it.
I love it. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who love true crime just like you do can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime every single day and you're also on Facebook, Go join our closed Facebook group, the In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions and you're in. Go join. Be sure to answer the questions.
Please.
I post a lot of photos and other information in there as well. It's a great group of folks. That's our family.
Yep, sure is.
You can also send us a text. If you look in the show notes, it's at the very top. It says, send Chris and Rob a text. I'm going to share a couple.
Okay.
From Southern Pines, North Carolina. Hello, Chris and Rob. You do a great job with your podcast. I love your format and storytelling style. I used to always listen while walking or driving, but now I like to watch on YouTube because of the photos you show.
Awesome.
And mostly because we get to see y'all and Scotty. What a super cute dog.
He is.
Look, Scotty, you're getting all kinds of accolades.
Look at that. I'm going to even hold him up for you YouTubers.
Thanks for all your great work.
Yes.
Also from Rebecca in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, y'all, it's Rebecca from Ball Ground, Georgia. Thanks for giving us something to look forward to on Hump Day, Wednesdays, when we always come out. Are you all ready for some SEC football? Go Dogs and Cats. I'm wearing my Kentucky blue today, except on September 14th, which is coming up. It just means more.
Yeah.
That's the slogan. It just means more.
There you go.
We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it every single episode.
And we have a special thanks for our coffee donators this week. I'm going to call them.
Okay.
And it's Katie from Cardiff, Wales.
All the way from Wales.
All the way from Wales. And that's where my heritage is from, too.
Look at you. Yeah. You and Katie are probably kin and don't even know it.
I'm sure we're related somehow. And the second one is from our dear, dear friend, Catherine Kaufman, the H2H resident psychic medium.
Yes, she is.
Yes. We love you, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Catherine.
And thank you, Katie.
We appreciate all these messages and emails and coffees and shout outs.
Yes.
We thank you so much for being with us every single week.
And if you want to send Scotty a dog biscuit, no, that's...
There's not a link for that. Believe me, he gets plenty. Yeah. He's okay.
Now, actually, he gets vegetables and fruits. Those are his treats. He loves them.
He does. Carrots and apples.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, more than one person suggested this case. I did a really, really deep dive, did lots of investigating, lots of research, and it just really needed to be separated into two parts. I mean, there is a show on Apple TV that I think is like 5 or 6 episodes. So surely me breaking it into 2 parts isn't all that bad.
Right, right.
Before I get started, let me thank some sources. All That's Interesting, Colander.com, History vs. Hollywood, Digital Spy, Web Sleuths, The Midwest Crime Files, The People vs. Hall, WTHR in Indiana, MyWabashValley.com, NBC News, The Columbia Tribune, The Charlie Project, Wish TV in Indianapolis, FBI Gov, The Indianapolis Star, TheDoughnetwork.org, Medium.com, Vocal.media, Vlad TV, and there is a book, In with the Devil, A Fallen Hero, a Serial Killer, and a Dangerous Bargain for Redemption by James Keene, a guy we're going to talk about a lot today.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Last week when I left you hanging, police and FBI had picked up Larry Hall from his house in Wabash, Indiana. Larry signed a confession admitting to abducting and murdering Jessica Roach and other girls, including Tricia Reitler, when he pointed to her photograph saying, quote, "All of the girls looked alike. I cannot remember all of them. I picked up several girls in other areas, but I can't remember which ones I hurt," end quote.
Wow.
There were no notes, no tape recordings or video recordings of this session, and instead, FBI agent Randolph wrote out a statement in narrative format and asked Larry to sign it, and Detective Miller was present for at least part of this questioning, and he continued to talk with Larry for an hour or so after this statement is signed.
I still don't understand why they didn't record this thing.
Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because Larry said, "I don't want to see myself talking about this."
Okay, when did he get to call the shots?
Well, he did.
Okay.
He did.
All right.
That's what they're saying.
Gotcha.
Larry Hall was booked into the Grant County Jail at 3:25 a.m. on November 16th, 1994. And this signed confession, it lasted a whole 12 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, because the next day, Larry meets with Dr. Jim Cates. They want to know what kind of mental health issues Larry has.
Okay.
But instead of getting into his feelings and his mental condition, Larry recants his confessions and tells Detective Gary Miller, quote, "I was just sharing my dreams with you. None of that actually happened."
Wow.
End quote.
Okay.
Larry recants everything, including how he had murdered Tricia Reitler. And this becomes a pattern. Each time they interrogate Larry, he would confess, but then he retracted the next time they questioned him. They couldn't get a genuine admission of guilt from him. Quote, "I just do things. I'm not in control," end quote.
I'm not in control.
Yeah, he's a little knuck and futz.
Yeah, well, when I read that, "I just do things, I'm not in control," that's me at Target. I'm not in control. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you.
That's a good one.
But they go to his house at 325 Grant Street, where he still lives with his parents. And when they go through his things, they find a to-do list, including one that says clean van.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Lots of circumstantial evidence in these cases.
Right.
On December 13th, 1994, Larry is charged with 1 count of kidnapping Jessica Roach for the purpose of sexual gratification and willfully transporting her from Illinois to Indiana in violation of federal law. And federal prosecutor Larry Beaumont was the one bringing the charges. And the court denied Larry Hall's motion to suppress his confession because they're going to say it was coerced. February 13th, 1995, Larry Hall meets with Dr. Hartman, a psychologist and neuropsychologist. Dr. Hartman administered an IQ screening test and a symptom checklist 90, a test for personality characteristics, and the MMPI. Then in April and May of 1995, Larry met with Greg Halgeson, a clinical psychologist, and they test Larry again, and they talked with him again.
Okay.
And part of what Larry is doing is confessing to crimes and telling them where bodies are buried, sending police on a wild goose chase, and even confessing to crimes he did not commit so that police could discover that he couldn't have been the killer in that particular case.
So he's kind of crazy like a fox.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So he would have an alibi for things that he confessed to.
Right.
Or he was with someone else, or he was in another part of the country at the time. So it's hard for them to tell if Larry is a serial killer or a serial confessor.
Right.
A couple of months later, in May of 1995, another Jane Doe turns up in Champaign County, Illinois. In 2020, she will be identified as Carrie Lynn Wyant. Larry is suspected as her killer. But the trial begins in August of 1995. So there's still all these bodies out there that people are finding, even though he's in custody.
Okay.
And when this trial begins in 1995, Larry's entire theory of defense boils down to one simple proposition.
Okay.
Due to a personality disorder that makes him susceptible to suggestion and pathologically eager to please, he, quote, confessed to a crime that he didn't really commit in order to gain approval from the law enforcement officers who were interrogating him.
Okay.
He did it because he thought that's what they wanted to hear.
Okay.
He was, in the words of the Wabash police, a, quote, wannabe, end quote. At the trial, one psychologist and one psychiatrist testified about his mental and emotional problems. Social worker Timothy Myers, who had treated Larry at the Bowen Center,
Yeah.
he testified, well, remember, he's the guy who was like the psychologist who met with him.
Oh, yeah.
The Wabash police are like, dude, you got to quit stalking these young girls. Why don't you come meet with this psychologist?
Right.
And he actually testified about the fact of his treatment, but the district court did not permit Larry to have his expert witnesses testify about his condition.
Okay. Why not?
They just didn't.
Okay.
They let some of his psychiatrists and psychologists, but the expert witnesses, nope, they didn't let them on the witness stand.
Interesting.
And as far as Larry's confession being coerced, the FBI and the federal prosecutor, Larry Beaumont, say that Larry didn't want his confessions taped because he didn't want to, quote, listen to the terrible things he had done, end quote.
Okay, well, that's called a confession.
Well, yeah, but, you said he's crazy like a fox.
Yeah, no.
Well, if it's not recorded,
Right,
was it real or not? Did he really say it? It's a he said, she said.
right.
Now, according to Larry, he had these dark obsessions and deadly dreams. He says in court that he admitted to the murders so he could go home. His trial was carried out in federal court with Judge Harold Baker presiding, and even though the judge won't allow these expert witnesses to testify on Larry's behalf, the prosecution has a trick up their sleeve. They have a witness who IDs Larry's van being in the very cornfield where Jesse's body is found. Larry is found guilty of kidnapping Jesse Roach, but officials have no idea how many women and young girls Larry has actually abducted, raped, mutilated, and murdered. And was he responsible for Tricia Reitler's disappearance? And if he was, where in the world is her body?
Right.
Larry had this to say to the judge, quote, I'd just like to say to you, Judge Baker, and God in heaven, that I did not commit this crime, end quote. The next month, in July of 1995, a Jane Doe is found in Pulaski County, Kentucky. In February of 2020, her remains were identified as Christy York Witcher of Allen County. Larry is suspected of her murder. Then on August 18th, 1995, Larry Hall is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But more Jane Does are being found. September 1995, a Jane Doe is found in Bensalem, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who won't be identified until 2021 as Mary Beth Hodgkinson. Larry's a suspect in her case. Then in February of 1996, Larry Hall's attorney, Craig H. DeArmond, argued for a new trial for Larry before the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. He believed that Larry didn't receive a fair trial because they didn't allow the expert witnesses on the stand in Larry's defense to say that the police had coerced him and he had the type of personality that was easily malleable.
Actually, that was my thought when I was asking you the question before. I'm thinking, this is going to come back to bite him.
Maybe.
Okay.
Larry, according to his attorney, told them what they wanted to hear and not the truth, and Larry is granted a second trial. December 1996, another Jane Doe is found in South Bend, Indiana. Her body is found in an overgrown area with thick brush in South Bend. She still hasn't been identified, and her body was badly decomposed. She is believed to be a victim of Larry Hall.
Okay.
So Larry's going to get another trial, and everyone is thinking that it's just one more chance for Larry to get off because he's convicted of kidnapping and crossing state lines that resulted in a death. But they don't have proof that Larry did anything. There's no DNA evidence, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And Larry's been deemed by his experts as not mentally capable, and everything they have on Larry is what Larry told them, and he is saying he was being coerced.
Right.
But the federal prosecutor, Larry Beaumont, who brought charges against Larry Hall, is a busy guy. And he's bringing charges against more people than just Larry Hall. He's got a lot of cases going on.
He's got a big docket.
He does. So I want you to meet somebody, Jimmy Keene.
Okay.
Born in Kankakee, Illinois, to parents James Big Jim and Lynn Keene. Big Jim was a decorated police officer and Lynn owned a restaurant. Jimmy Keene was an average all-American kid. He was one of 4 children. He was the oldest and became responsible for sort of helping to feed his family after his parents' divorce when he's 11 years old. And the family was poor. They lived on the south side of Chicago, and during the 80s, that's a pretty crime-riddled area.
Okay.
When Jimmy is only 12 years old, he and a couple of his buddies found 8 hefty bags in a cornfield that were filled with marijuana. So they go back and take it all one night. They leave it there in the daylight. They go back in the middle of the night and take it. And then Jimmy sold the weed to older kids who were actually dealers. Now, there are 3 kids doing this. There's 3 kids running this operation.
Right.
Jimmy, Timmy, and Kevin. And it almost sounds like fiction, but it's not.
There was Jimmy, and then there was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy.
Jimmy, Timmy, and Kevin.
And Kevin.
The weed dealers.
The weed dealers. They're not even 13 yet.
Oh,
Now, Jimmy is extremely close to his father, Big Jim. They called him Big Jim because he was 6'5", 300 pounds.
wow.
And Jimmy is an exceptional athlete in school. He's captain of his football team. He's captain of his wrestling team when he gets to high school. And eventually, he's going to add a few black belts to his name.
Nice.
Jimmy's a smart, handsome, charismatic guy. I've seen interviews with him. He still is, even after all these years.
Okay.
And when Jimmy is 17 years old and going to school at Kankakee East Ridge High School, he's making almost $1 million a year now
Good Lord.
by selling weed,
Wow.
all while going to high school and playing football and wrestling.
Wow. I wonder what his source is.
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
He's running an underground marijuana business that was raking in all kinds of money. Also, at the age of 17, his mother kicked him out of the house to live on his own. His mom is a full-blooded Italian girl who thought Jimmy needed to be gone. He's 17, you're an adult. So he moved out and into Chicago on his own. But Jimmy's a really good football player, and he was nicknamed the Assassin on the football field.
Wow.
And by the time he's graduating, he had offers to play on scholarship at more than a handful of D1 schools.
Really?
So, really good football programs.
Yeah.
But he was making so much money that he didn't want to leave Chicago. So he went to school at Triton College, where he played football and he wrestled, and he was team captain for both sports. Quote, "It wasn't even a conscious thought at that age. If I'm making $500,000 to $1 million a year and eventually way more, why would I walk away from the business when I could just go to college here in Chicago and build up my savings," end quote.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Quote, "I went to college and had a blast, and the weed business grew and grew."
Man.
In 1984, when Jimmy is 20 years old, he leaves school after his sophomore year in college because he's so busy with his business. And by now, he is fully integrated with the Chicago Mafia.
Ooh.
And again, his mom was Italian, and his father, Jimmy's grandfather, was actually Al Capone's driver.
Really?
Told you. Sounds like it's fiction, but it's real.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So Jimmy gets indoctrinated into that Chicago crime family.
Mhm.
But Jimmy's weed, here's what you were asking, is coming from Mexico
Okay.
and through Arizona to him.
Gotcha.
The Chicago mob's weed is coming through Panama and into Florida.
Okay.
But soon Chicago can't get their product out of Panama because of the invasion in Panama and Noriega.
Right.
And they want Jimmy to give them product at his cost without a markup. The long and short of it is they couldn't get enough product, enough weed.
Mhm.
So Jimmy started working with a Mexican cartel.
Ooh.
Now, mind you, Jimmy has said that he had members of the Chicago Drug Task Force on his payroll. So he's greasing a lot of palms
Sure.
to keep his business going smoothly.
Right.
Again, he's a smart, handsome, charismatic guy.
Right.
But in order to make up for what the Chicago mob wanted, their product that they needed, that's why he got involved with the Mexican cartel.
Gotcha.
By the time he's 28 years old, FedEx is actually delivering 500 pounds of weed to his doorstep without any problem
Man.
until it was a problem.
Okay. All right.
In 1992, he's picked up when a huge shipment they'd picked up off the porch was inside 2 trucks. So they would have the weed delivered by FedEx and they'd put it on the porch. And then they would leave it on the porch for a couple days and watch it like with binoculars
Right.
to see if there was police or feds or anybody around.
Gotcha.
And when it looked like the coast was clear, they would pick up this weed off the porch and put it inside trucks. And so they've picked this weed up and they've put it in 2 trucks, and the narc squad surrounds the trucks. But Jimmy's attorney gets him off.
Really?
Yeah, it was something to do about the fact that the weed was in the trucks and they couldn't really prove that it was his.
Ah. Okay.
But in 1996, something called Operation Snowplow, a police operation tackling drug offenses that resulted in more than 170 arrests.
Wow.
Snowplow raided his home, and Jimmy was prosecuted after his old girlfriend, who had become his housekeeper, ratted him out. The federal prosecutor on this case, Larry Beaumont, the same guy who's prosecuting Larry Hall.
Right.
And this time, Jimmy is sentenced to 120 months, 10 years behind bars without the possibility of parole. He was told to plead guilty in order to get a lesser sentence, but that didn't happen, and he actually got the maximum sentence.
Wow.
Quote, I still had 4 appeal options, and they knew I was probably going to get something reversed back on appeal, get some time knocked off my sentence. They knew I'd find a way to get out of there, end quote.
Okay.
And he did.
Wow.
In 1999, Jimmy was serving a 10-year sentence, and Jimmy hated prison. I read that, but I was like, who would like prison?
Duh.
But he was going to do 10 years for making a bunch of money selling weed and a little bit of cocaine. There was some cocaine in there.
Okay.
But Larry Beaumont, who prosecuted him and Larry Hall, goes to Jimmy and says, I've got an offer for you. I want you to go undercover and make friends with a suspected serial killer named Larry Hall.
There you go.
I need you to get him to confess to at least 2 more murders out of the 19 we think he committed.
Yeah.
And why would this federal prosecutor make this offer? Well, because Larry was granted his appeal, and there was a possibility, because it's mostly circumstantial evidence, if they get these expert witnesses on the stand, they're afraid Larry's going to walk free.
Right.
And Larry and his attorney keep hammering away that he's not going to get a fair trial because of his mental illness. So just for clarification, there are 2 Larrys. Larry Beaumont is the federal prosecutor.
Right.
Larry Hall is the crazy guy in jail who's been killing all these girls.
And my other brother, Larry.
That's right. So Jimmy's thinking, okay, I wouldn't have to do another 9 years in prison in this minimum security prison in Michigan,
Mhm.
which wasn't great,
Right.
but was pretty safe. It's full of white-collar criminals.
Sure.
Or he can go to the United States Medical Center for federal prisoners who are criminally insane in Springfield, Missouri, a maximum security mental health facility where there's always the risk that he could be killed.
Man.
Yeah,
Jeez.
just to get what he needed to get out of this serial killer. Because they tell him, Jimmy, if you can get a confession out of him, we'll wash your record clean and you can walk out of jail a free man.
Wow.
So that's the carrot they've dangled.
What a choice.
Yeah. So Larry Beaumont wanted confessions, he wanted body locations, and if Jimmy got that, they'd set him free, they would expunge his criminal record. And this is exactly the subject of the series Blackbird on Apple.
Okay.
Now, while Jimmy's incarcerated, his father, who loves him very much, has a stroke. And Jimmy kind of blames himself because he'd put his dad under so much stress.
Right.
And if he's sitting in prison, he can't help his dad.
Right.
So he agrees to do this undercover work for Larry Beaumont. And at first, they tried to coach Jimmy, like how to act and what to say. And he was like, guys, I got this.
I got this.
Yeah. Why don't you just send in an undercover FBI agent?
Right.
And they admitted that Larry Hall would spot that a mile away.
Oh, wow.
So Jimmy was saying to them, if you can't do it, why would I take advice from you on how to do the job?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did read where Jimmy was sitting in the U.S. Marshal's vehicle outside the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And he's thinking, I'm changing my mind. I'm not going in. I've changed my mind, guys. I'm not going in.
I don't want to do this.
But the marshals chat with him about it, and he agrees. And while he's inside and undercover, the lead psychiatrist on the inside of the prison knows what Jimmy is doing.
Okay.
That's the only person inside the prison who knows.
And they can trust this guy.
And they trust this guy. He's
Okay.
working with the federal government.
Okay.
He's working with the feds.
All right.
So Jimmy can always go to him and have a safe person on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
On the outside, they're going to give Jimmy a girlfriend. A girlfriend
Okay.
who's actually an FBI agent.
Oh, wow.
So 7 months into his 10-year sentence, Jimmy walks into this prison for the criminally insane.
Good grief.
His backstory was that he was a convicted weapons runner who was pushed over the edge when he learned that he would have to serve 40 years in prison. The FBI has told Jimmy to settle in for 6 months. Settle in, be there about 6 months, then go befriend Larry Hall.
Right.
And Jimmy said, yeah, no. In fact, he said, quote, no f***ing way,
Jimmy. Larry.
end quote.
I don't blame him.
And on the first day, Jimmy made it a point to bump into Larry in the cafeteria, like physically bump into him.
Okay.
But Larry wouldn't even make eye contact with Jimmy. But Jimmy asked him, do you know where the library is? Because he knew from the feds that Larry spent time in the library.
Okay.
Then about 2 weeks into his time in prison, Larry was watching TV. Jimmy's in the room with him, and they were watching, of all things, America's Most Wanted.
Oh, really?
Well, remember I told you, Larry likes true crime.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And this really large prisoner came into the room, and he turned off the TV. And Jimmy gets up and turns it back on. And this really big prisoner gets up and turns it back off. And then Jimmy and the prisoner get into a fight, a fist fight.
Wow.
Jimmy decks this guy, this big guy,
Yeah.
and starts beating him up. He's pulled off the guy who turned off the TV, and he's put into solitary confinement. And when he gets out, that's when Jimmy gained Larry Hall's trust.
Ah.
Someone had gone to war for him.
Sure.
Someone had gone to war for Larry.
Yeah.
And Jimmy protected Larry from that moment on, and over time gained his trust. For a little over 5 months, Jimmy was with Larry every single day. And while he's inside the prison, the only person who knew what was happening was this prison's chief psychiatrist. And remember, in order to get information out, he's got this FBI agent who's playing his girlfriend.
Right.
Her name is Janet Butkus,
Butkus?
who is the niece of NFL legend
Number
Dick
51,
Butkus.
Chicago Bears, Dick
Yes.
Butkus. He was my hero when I was a kid.
That is her uncle.
Wow.
And I told you, sounds like fiction.
She can't make this
Can't
up.
make it up.
Yeah.
She pretended to be Jimmy's girlfriend. She would visit him in prison, and to make sure it looked real, Jimmy would kiss Janet when she came to visit. Now, I've seen an interview with Jimmy, and I don't know if it's Janet or another female FBI agent, but apparently they did have a little something going on
Oh, really?
behind the scenes.
Oh, wow.
Also, while Jimmy is in prison with Larry, he befriends Genovese crime family boss Vincent the Chin Gigante.
Wow.
You ever hear of Vincent the Chin Gigante?
Vincent Louis Gigante, also known as the Chin,
Right.
was the boss of the Genovese crime family in New York City
Yeah.
from 1981 to 2005.
Yep.
He was a professional boxer before becoming a mafia enforcer for the Luciano crime family, which later became the Genovese family.
Right.
The Chin was known for his ruthless nature and deadly criminal empire. He was also known as the, quote, odd father, end quote, because he would often wander the streets of Greenwich Village in a bathrobe and pajamas, muttering to himself.
Which they think that was an act so he could try to plead insanity when he was in court.
And where is he?
He's in the criminally insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His nickname, the Chin, came from his Italian first name, Vincenzo. He was able to maintain his power for decades by feuding with the police and FBI and feigning insanity. He would shuffle around Greenwich Village he's unshaven, he's wearing this tattered bathrobe, he's muttering incoherently.
Yep.
Yeah. His relatives, including a brother who was a Roman Catholic priest, insisted that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease. The Chin is in this very same federal prison, and he liked Jimmy. But the Chin advised Jimmy not to hang out with child killers like Larry Hall.
Oh.
Because that's a big thing in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kill a kid, you rape a kid.
Yep.
That's bad news when you get to prison.
Oh, yeah.
But Jimmy did hang out with Larry Hall, who, by the way, has said that Larry called him James and not Jimmy. He would call him James. Larry Hall called him James.
Okay.
But Jimmy tells this story about seeing Larry reading the Wabash newspaper, the little hometown newspaper from where he's from.
Right.
And Jimmy tells him that his mother gets that newspaper too, that she lives near Wabash, and she's told him that Jimmy's mom told Jimmy that Larry is a killer. Yeah.
Wow.
Dude, my mom told me you're a killer.
Yeah.
And Larry explains to Jimmy that he's not a killer, that all the girls really, really liked him. Quote, they were my girlfriends, end quote.
Wow.
The Chin would visit Jimmy's cell and play bocce ball outside with him.
Wow.
He would also eat breakfast with him. And when it cut into Jimmy's Larry time, Jimmy just started going to Larry's cell at night. He'd go in there at night to chat.
Gotcha.
So for about 6 months, Jimmy and Larry would have these regular conversations. And during this time, Larry starts bragging. He gave Jimmy information on as many as 20 of his crimes involving women or young girls, including the idea that he had used acid cocktails to dissolve their bodies in the ground when he buried them. Something he learned by working at the cemetery and in the cleaning business.
Right.
When Jimmy brought up Trisha Reitler, he got Larry to admit to burying Trisha's body, quote, in a place that was way out in the country, end quote. Larry told Jimmy the night he abducted Trisha, he took her to his home and left her bound in the back of his van while he pondered what to do with her. I don't know what to do with her. Larry said he later drove to a wilderness area near Wabash, murdered her, and buried her.
Wow.
However, Jimmy was unable to get a precise location, and without a body, there wouldn't be enough to convict Larry Hall of murder.
Right.
But he did confess to murdering Tricia and also Jessica Roach, saying that Jessie was begging for her mother and it made him mad. He also tells Jimmy that he strangled Jessie using 2 leather belts connected together, something only the killer would know.
Right.
Then, not long after Jimmy has a conversation with Larry about 19-year-old Tricia Reitler, Jimmy found Larry in the prison workshop with a map. And on the map were all these red dots. And sitting on top of the map were 10 to 15 little wooden falcons about the size of a chess piece.
Really?
Larry has carved these little wooden falcons.
Wow.
And Jimmy asks Larry about the birds.
Right.
And I'm only assuming, and I did look at it, there wasn't anything that kind of said definitively. I guess Blackbird has more of an alliterative, alliteration to it that sounds a little bit better for Hollywood.
Sure.
They were not blackbirds. They were wooden falcons.
Okay.
And Larry tells him that these are falcons, quote, they watch over the dead, end quote. He'd named the wooden falcons and told Jimmy, quote, I watch over the spirits in the afterlife until I join them, end quote. And I did a little digging, and you know how Larry loves history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sokar was one of the key gods who was related to the afterlife in Egyptian times.
Okay.
He was primarily worshipped in Memphis, the first capital of the United Upper and Lower Egypt. And since the Old Kingdom, which was about 2500 to 2100 BC, he was considered to be the god of the dead, and he was a falcon, and the patron of the cemeteries of Memphis, an area which included the pyramids of Giza.
Okay.
Now, there are many theories about the origin of his name. One argument is that it comes from the term skur, which means cleaning of the mouth. This refers to the opening of the mouth ceremony, which was performed as part of the rituals in Egypt to prepare the dead for the afterlife.
Okay.
And the aim of the ceremony was to give the dead back the ability to move, breathe, see, hear, and eat. In other words, the body was reanimated so that the person could live fully in the afterlife just as they had done when they were alive.
Gotcha.
And this Egyptian god is a falcon.
Okay.
But Larry tells Jimmy that the wooden falcons, quote, watch over the spirits in the afterlife until I join them, end quote.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And as Jimmy's looking at this map, he realizes this is a hand-drawn map of Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And these red dots are where he has buried all these women and young girls.
Wow.
And after Jimmy sees this, he hurries off to a payphone and he calls his fake girlfriend, FBI agent Janet Butkus. But it was late at night and he didn't reach her, but he left a message telling her to come and get him. He'd gotten his confession, he had seen Larry's map, and Jimmy thinks they're going to come right away, like the next day to get him out and to get that map from Larry, because the deal it was always 24-hour notice, we pull you out.
Right.
So he's thinking he's leaving.
Right.
He's blowing this popsicle stand. He's been in there with Larry, who he just gives him the creeps. And finally, Jimmy lets his real feelings be known. Quote, I went across to his cell over there. The repulsiveness I felt about him throughout the whole time I had to stay being his friend, and the disdain and dislike I had for him, that I thought it was good for me to unload on him and tell him what I really thought of him and who he really was. I said, I'm going to be going home tomorrow, Larry. Jimmy tells him, quote, you're a monster, end quote.
Wow.
And this is when Larry looks at Jimmy and says, quote, Beaumont sent you, didn't he?
Oh, man.
And Jimmy looked at him and said, quote, you're fucked, end quote.
Wow. Why would he do that?
Why would he tell?
I mean, Yeah. If I were in that situation, I would say, you know what? I'm just going to play it cool until my butt is out of here.
Exactly.
Wow.
But we didn't walk in Jimmy's shoes.
I
We
know.
hadn't been in this criminally insane,
I know.
prison. And he has had to act like he likes this guy as he talks about all the horrible things he's done to
Yeah.
people.
I'm just on Jimmy's side. I just don't want him to
Yeah.
get screwed
Yeah.
here.
Well, it's coming.
Oh, gee.
Because here's the problem. His FBI cover, Janet Butkus, never got back in touch with him. She never even heard the message.
Really?
And the chief psychiatrist, his inside contact,
Yeah.
is on vacation.
He's on vacation.
For such a smart guy, Jimmy,
Yeah,
that was really stupid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Larry's psychologist at the prison was furious. She was so mad at Jimmy for upsetting Larry and turning him into an emotional wreck. And at 4 a.m. the next morning, after he says, Larry, you're
Yeah.
Jimmy's thinking, he's laying in bed thinking, I'm out of here tomorrow morning. Larry's psychologist tells the guards to, quote, grab him, take him, and throw him in the hole until I know who he is, end quote. They take Jimmy and throw him into solitary confinement.
Well, actually, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to him.
Not while your inside contact is on 2 weeks of vacation, it's not.
But at least you have a little bit of protection. You're not out in GP at all.
That's true.
Yeah. Get me out of here. I don't care where.
Well,
it is.
it wasn't a good thing. I know you think it's a good thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't a good thing for him.
Yeah.
The federal prosecutor, Larry Beaumont, didn't know what happened or where Jimmy went. And when authorities started calling the prison to ask about Jimmy, they were saying, we don't have a record of this guy. It was as if Jimmy Keene had disappeared.
Wow.
And later, Agent Butkus will claim that her phone system had lost his message. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later when Jimmy's internal contact in the prison, the chief psychiatrist, returned from vacation and discovered what had happened, that Jimmy was taken out of solitary confinement. 2 weeks he's in solitary
Jeez.
confinement.
Wow.
Now, in the series, Taron Egerton, who plays Jimmy, is pleading for something to write with.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually uses his own blood on the wall to try to remember the dots on the map.
Wow.
Now, in reality, Jimmy kept it in his head as best he could.
Okay.
Now, after this, and sometime during those 2 weeks, Larry Hall got rid of his map. It's believed he either mailed it to his brother or he destroyed it. And what's more, now Larry knows that Jimmy was only his friend in order to get information out of him.
Right.
Now, in hindsight, Jimmy has admitted that he should have waited a few more days
You
before
think?
telling Larry
You
what
think?
he really thought of him.
Wow.
Quote, I'm disappointed. I didn't wait another day or two at least. I should have waited a few more days, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
However, Jimmy has pointed out that the confessions and the information that he got from Larry led to the reopening of several cold cases that may have involved an alleged serial killer.
Okay.
Quote, I did a good deed. I did a lot of good things, and that's where I feel the redemption comes in. I've done something good for the things that I did wrong, end quote.
Okay.
And he's right.
Right.
The information Jimmy got out of Larry was instrumental in Larry losing his appeal and remaining in prison. Jimmy pointed out that even if the map had been recovered, each red dot represented hundreds of miles of area to search,
Mm-hmm.
which is an impossible task unless Larry actually revealed more information about his victims' locations.
Right.
It is worth mentioning that Larry did later give the coordinates of where two bodies could be found. However, when a team went out and dug up the area, they found absolutely nothing. FBI forensics experts concluded that this was likely because Larry had buried each of his victims in his dissolving acid cocktail. Jimmy Keene was released early from his prison sentence, and he took a polygraph with regard to the confessions from Larry Hall. In total, he got confessions pertaining to Larry's involvement in the disappearance of 20 different young girls. Some of the confessions were recorded via a bug that Jimmy planted in Larry's cell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
On August 18th, 1997, Larry's second trial begins, 4 years after Jessica Roach was abducted. This time, the expert on forced false confessions is heard. This trial lasted 8 days, and after that, a jury of 7 women and 5 men found Larry Dwayne Hall guilty of abducting Jessica Roach and taking her across state lines. Jesse Roach's parents gave impact statements before sentencing, saying, quote, "When Larry Hall stole, violated, and then killed our daughter, it was like taking a sharp stick and poking God in the eye. May God show you mercy, because I have none," end quote.
Wow.
And again, on December 2nd, 1997, Larry was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole by Judge Joe D. McDade in the U.S. District Court of Peoria, Illinois. The new evidence was the main reason that the judge in Larry Hall's case denied his appeal. In 2008, Larry wrote a letter to a St. Louis television reporter that he killed Lolly Chavez, the runaway from California. So detectives from St. Clair County went to North Carolina, where Larry was now in a different prison for the insane. And when they met him, they thought they were going to be coming up against this monster. But when they walked in, they said, quote, "This little guy, he looked like Danny DeVito," end quote.
Not only are we kidnappers, but I'm about to have a close encounter with a cattle prod.
Wow.
But the letter Larry sent to the reporter implied that he had found Lolly hitching a ride in St. Louis. In 2009, Larry Hall called Christopher Hawley Martin, who's an author writing a book about him, and told him of his innocence. He said he didn't kidnap and murder Jessica Roach. A man named Lester O'Toole was responsible. In 2010, Indianapolis cold case officers visited Larry Hall to question him about the Michelle Dewey murder and other cases. He denied ever hurting anyone. In 2011, Larry Hall sent another letter to author Christopher Hawley Martin in which he claimed responsibility for Paulette Webster's murder. Larry claimed Paulette was taken from the main east and west roads through Chester near a mobile home park. He then claimed he took Paulette to a remote location where she was kept and sexually assaulted for several hours. Larry either threw her in the Mississippi River or buried her. He wrote, quote, "If I did it, I would have put her in a river or in a field," end quote. If I did it. Yeah. So he confessed and then said, "If I did it."
If I did it, yeah. Wow.
Then in an interview with the Associated Press on May 26, 2011, Larry claimed to have abducted 39 women between 1980 and 1994,
Wow.
including Laurie Deppes. And despite confessing to the murder of Laurie Deppes in 1992 and to the kidnapping, rape, and murder of 15-year-old Jesse Roach in 1993, Larry Dwayne Hall was never convicted of murder due to a lack of evidence to substantiate his claims.
Good grief.
But life in federal prison without parole means he will die there. So it's really important to note, he's never been convicted of murder. He was convicted of kidnapping and taking somebody across state lines that resulted in her death.
In her death, right.
But they're not saying that he was the reason for her death.
Right.
He has admitted and recanted 15 victims, including Lolly Chavez, Denise Flum, Michelle Dewey, Georgia Shreve, Jean Deppes, and of course, Jesse Roach and Tricia Reitler.
Right.
Murderer and, quote, alleged mass murderer Larry Hall is currently imprisoned at the Federal Correctional Complex in Butner, North Carolina. As for Jimmy Keene, well, he was released from prison in 1999 after serving a total sentence of approximately 17 months. His father, Big Jim Keene, was still alive at the time, and he got to spend 5 more years with his dad before his dad passed away in November of 2004.
Okay.
Jimmy's been a successful businessman for much of his life, running 2 multi-million-dollar legal businesses that he started, some of which happened during his drug-selling days. He became a best-selling author after writing the 2010 book, In With the Devil, about his experience going undercover. In addition to being an executive producer on Blackbird, which is the Apple series about how Larry and Jimmy got together, Jimmy even had a cameo in the series.
Oh, really?
He plays a guard.
Oh, wow.
As for Gary, Larry's twin brother, he has said that Larry confessed to him that he'd killed 15 women across multiple states, including California, Illinois, Missouri, and Wyoming. I just want to tell you, I never mentioned a girl from California. Never mentioned a murder in California.
Right.
Authorities believe that Larry may have murdered as many as 50. And no one knows what happened to the map. He could have sent it to his brother who destroyed it, or his father may have destroyed it like the TV show depicted it.
Right.
Some of the storylines in the series are not true. There was never a guard trying to blackmail money out of Jimmy while he was there.
Okay.
There is at least one wooden falcon out there. Lester Holt had it with him when he interviewed Jimmy, which is pretty creepy.
Really?
I believe they got it from Larry's house.
Wow.
Today, Larry Hall is 61 years old and is serving his life sentence without parole. He's currently at the Federal Bureau of Prisons at FCI Butner Medium 2, which is a medium security prison in North Carolina. Other famous inmates with him. You want to know some people who are in there with him?
Yeah.
R. Kelly,
Really?
who's serving his 30-year sentence.
Wow.
Gilberto Rodriguez, or Yulia, the co-founder of the Cali cartel.
Wow.
I probably said his name wrong. Samuel Israel III, who was a hedge fund manager running a $450 million fraud scheme. Bernie Madoff was there.
Oh, really?
He died at the medical center there in 2021.
Wow.
Joe Maldonado Passage. Do you know who he is?
I don't.
That's Joe Exotic from Tiger King.
Oh, really?
Can you even imagine Larry and Joe together?
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe's now at the federal prison in Fort Worth. Ted Kaczynski was also a
Really?
prisoner there. He was found dead in the prison there in 2023. If you have access to Apple TV to watch Blackbird, I highly recommend it. Paul Walter Hauser, who played Larry, won an Emmy Award, a Golden Globe, and a Critics' Choice Award for his acting chops.
I like Vans.
His acting chops in his mutton chops.
Yeah.
In case you don't make the connection, he's also the guy who plays Sean, the funny guy who is Tanya Harding's bodyguard.
Oh, yeah.
Sean Eckhart in I, Tonya,
Yeah.
the braggadocious,
Yep.
moronic bodyguard who masterminded the plot to kneecap Nancy Kerrigan.
Right.
But he's an excellent, excellent actor. I don't think he gets enough accolades. He's a comedian, actually.
Oh, really?
But he plays this dramatic role incredibly well. I did read that he and Taron Egerton both had a couple of days while they were filming where they had a hard time coming out of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
It's that intense.
Wow.
But that is the story of the real Blackbird, or should I say the real wooden falcons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I assume that they called it Blackbird because they probably couldn't use the title of effing falcon.
Wooden falcon, effing wooden falcon, which is, I got to say, Jimmy has got an Italian mom, grew up in Chicago. I mean, a lot of his interviews, it's F words in there a lot.
I'm sure.
I only used the quotes that were important.
Right.
Like, you're
Yeah. Yeah. I got it. Well, let's move on from Larry's maniacal, chaotic, insane world and go to the maniacal, chaotic, insane world of Bless Your Heart.
of the idiots.
Yeah.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, a crime dog's short commute.
Oh, is this really about a dog?
Oh, you'll like this.
Okay.
A Florida man apparently thought he was safe when he set up a pot growing tent in the woods near a police dog training facility.
He needed Jimmy's help.
Yeah, evidently. A drug-sniffing dog in training discovered the operation while practicing in a nearby field, reports the South Florida Sun-Sentinel.
Okay.
The dog became excited and pulled its handler off the trail into the woods and into the tent.
Oops.
Yep. Authorities found 79 pot plants and about a pound of cultivated marijuana. The investigation led agents to a nearby trailer and a 38-year-old suspect who was charged with 2 felonies.
It's like in the Breaking Bad trailer, except he's not cooking meth,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, number 2.
Okay.
At least he was honest.
at least.
Yeah, a 41-year-old Oklahoma man being arraigned for DUI was rearrested and reportedly being drunk after he fell down before the judge.
Oh my gosh. Don't go to court wasted.
Oh, man. Mark Watson was originally arrested after a hit and run crash in Bartlesville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He admitted to have, I was drinking at the time of the crash, but blamed the other driver.
I just had one beer.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they always say? What have you been drinking? I've had one beer. Yeah. Yeah.
Quote, I'm drunk. I was driving, but I did not run the stop sign, Watson told the officer, according to charging documents. Now, Watson refused to take a blood or
breathalyzer test.
Yeah. I ain't taking no test. I'm drunk. I'm blind anyways, and I can't drive. Oh, and one more minor issue. Police said he then kicked an officer during the arrest.
I'm blind, but I know I did not run that stop sign.
Who knows?
What in the world?
It just didn't make any sense at all. Anyway, he was arraigned.
I was going to say, what happened to him?
Yeah. All right, number 3, and finally, this is my favorite.
Okay.
And being from the music world, this is classic.
Okay.
Ready?
Uh-huh.
Them's fighting words.
Them's fighting words.
Yeah, 2 neighbors in Florida got into a fist fight over the sexual orientation of country singer Conway Twitty.
What?
Joe Capes and Ronald Richards were hanging out in Richards' trailer when one of the men said Twitty was gay.
Oh, my gosh.
The 2 men got into a shoving match, and Capes punched Richards in the face, breaking his glasses and causing his eye to bleed.
Oh, my gosh.
Police were called, and he was arrested.
Conway Twitty ain't gay.
Oh, my gosh.
Who cares?
Oh, my
Let Conway be whoever. Conway's 6 feet under.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, man. So there's your bless your hearts.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody who's going to defend Conway Twitty to the end on their opinion of him.
By the way, Conway Twitty was my dad's favorite country artist.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Not that it matters.
Yeah.
It's a Seinfeld episode.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Go to hitchtohomicide.com where you'll find a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Right?
We're so glad you joined us again this week. That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.